Jane, from what you understand, what is the purpose of this task force and how quickly will they come back with some kind of recommendations of their own?
Laura, before I speak about the task force, let me just say on this day when we start to see the first of the funerals of those that have died in this terrible tragedy, my heart goes out to those grieving families and all of those that were going to carry the scars of this terrible day, this one of the darkest days in Australia's history for many years to come. The Coalition have said that we need more than unity, that we need more than solidarity right now. We also need action. And that's why Sussan Ley has announced a Coalition task force to deal with anti-Semitism, specifically to deal with anti-Semitism and our response to this tragic event. The task force, which is going to contain members of the Shadow Cabinet from the Shadow Attorney General through to the Shadow Minister for Education, Shadow Minister for Home Affairs and others, will deal with three things. Specifically, it's going to deal with driving change that was specifically recommended in Gillian Siegel's anti-Semitism envoy's report that has been ignored by the Prime Minister for the last 6 months. How do we implement those recommendations that would make a lasting and significant difference to the rising scourge of anti-Semitism in Australia? The second thing that it will do is address those counter-terrorism gaps in our counter-terrorism laws, in our law enforcement policy making, to make sure that we can protect Jewish Australians and indeed all Australians. And the final thing that we'll do, we'll make sure that we have an outreach program to deal with the Jewish community and its leaders and listen to what it is that they are telling us that they need from their government. Because let's face it, for the last 2 years, anti-Semitism has been on the rise. It's becoming embedded and emboldened in our society. And the government cannot shirk its responsibilities here. We've seen the rise of protests right around the country that have called for the eradication of Jews right around the world, but in Australia as well. We've seen marching protests under symbols of hate, under pictures of terrorist leaders. We've seen increasing graffiti, firebombs of synagogues and childcare centres, damage to individual properties around universities, the intimidation of Jewish students. This cannot continue. It's been happening increasingly over the last 2 years to the point where now there have been almost 10 times the number of reported incidents of anti-Semitism in the last 12 months as there were 10 years ago. And it's happened under this government's watch. Now, I agree, we all need to come together. This is a time for unity. This is a time for solidarity. But that doesn't mean it's also not a time for accountability or a time for action. And if the Prime Minister won't do it, well, the Coalition will.
There is a lot of comfort, I think, in the Coalition stepping up in this way as the alternative government. But even this task force will be limited. And I've got to say, Jane, I think the task force is absolutely noble. Perhaps it's something the government should be doing as well. Mike Pizzullo will be on the show too. He's calling for a commission of inquiry here. But I think this community is pretty sick of reports, and particularly reports not being acted on. We've got Gillian Siegel's recommendations here. Let's get this done. Should Parliament be recalled?
It's mind-blowing that this report has sat idle without a formal government response for the last 6 months. I can't think of a greater insult to the Jewish community than to appoint an envoy, a special envoy into anti-Semitism, commission a report and then ignore it for 6 months. And this is the consequence. Now, if there are reasons why those recommendations can't be implemented, fine. The government should step up and explain why it can't or won't implement those recommendations. But certainly we need to see a response of some sort, and that's what this Coalition task force will do. It will drive change, it will drive implementation of those recommendations. That's its number one priority. And it will also assist the government to make sure that we have the policy, procedures, the positions in place to keep Australians safe, not just the Jewish community in Australia, but all Australians safe? Is our counter-terrorism response adequate? Because let's face it, we've been warned of this threat for the last 2 years. Mike Burgess stepped up nearly a year ago, and said that this was his number one priority. The growing rise of anti-Semitism in Australia was his number one priority, the number one threat to life in Australia. Now, that prophecy unfortunately came true on Sunday. But what is the government going to do about it? I know the Prime Minister has called for unity, and absolutely, unity is what he should see, what we should do. But that doesn't mean we cannot be accountable. That doesn't mean that it's an excuse not to act. We don't just need solidarity, we need action.